hello, everybody. This is it. Shaman, you're right. Triple trouble today. I have 3 shows on a Wednesday, so this is triple trouble. We normally have double trouble with Jesse, so triple trouble.
I would love to be in a gang with you and Jesse. That would be a cool gang.
I was thinking today we actually should get you on with Jesse and we can talk about these things. It's actually was on my mind, so I'm going to organize us a show together. You, me, and Jesse. In fact, she's away next week. The following week, we're doing. She's back, and because she's doing all the stuff on the Mormon Church right now, which goes right in line with Chad Daybell, and maybe we'll talk then. Anyway, okay. Hello, everybody, and I hope you're all being good, behaving yourselves, not so much. We don't like to behave. No, we don't. Hello, Brice. I'm so happy to have you back. You've been gone for is it 2 weeks? No, like
2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. So I'm happy to be. And I just realized I feel like an idiot. Y'all, I'm not naked. I just realized that I have a leotard on. And I just realized.
Yeah, you look as though you're sitting there with your boobies hanging out or popping out. Not hanging, popping.
I'm doing a dance class online after this, so I have a leotard on to take the class.
Oh, nice.
Do what?
Who are you dancing with? What are you doing? Like an online dance class?
Alton. It's just going to be a little dance bar class. That's it. But I put my leotard on so I could just hop right to it after we're done. And then I'm sitting here, and we were chit-chatting before. I didn't notice it, and I was like, oh, crap. Well, maybe it'll get more viewers. I don't know. We'll see.
You're sitting there. Oops, hang on. I'm just going to plug in my laptop. Something's not going so well here. I mean, you've had an interesting time, but we're going to get there in a minute. Sorry, my laptop charge.
Oh, you're fine. Yes, I was definitely doing something these last 2 weeks that I cannot talk about openly yet. Shanti knows what it is, but I told Shanti when it's all said and done, I want to do a whole show on what I was up to these last 2 weeks with Shanti, because Shanti is the one that understands deeply people with delusional disorders. So
there are definitely some people that are a little bit Delulu.
There's some wackadoo people out there. So
anyway,
usually we talk about wackadoo people on Monday, but those wackadoo people are dead now. I'm dealing with an alive wackadoo person. So I thank God the justice system does work in our favor sometimes. So once I'm able to talk about everything, I told Shanti I would do it with her because she understands a deeper level of what's at play here. So, but I'm so happy to be back. Yes, Simona, I was actually down in Florida, and it's so freaking hot down there, and the sun is so intense. And
stop. Give us back our sun. You can see I'm sitting with electric water bottles here. Hot water bottles.
Well, it's like my boyfriend always makes fun of me because he's like very fair skinned. We'll be outside for 5 minutes, and that's the Vata skin, right? If you're the dosha Vata, I'll be outside for 5 minutes and I'll walk in and I've completely just taken. So 5 minutes in Florida, I have some gnarly tan lines, but just walking outside with the dog, also with the where it's right on the it's like right on the beach, and the reflection of the sand also helps you get a lot darker too. So. Yes. Oh, yeah, you know, Jojo Waken knows. Oh, the crazy lady you've been dealing with. Absolutely. So I can't say a whole lot more, guys. But once everything's done and dusted and finalized, I just don't want to mess the case up. So I'm not going to say anything yet. But
schmum is the word, not that we like it, because we like to chat about these things. So we have to keep it under wraps right now. It's very difficult for us. Us Aquarians, we just chat away about everything. It's such fun.
We're so transparent. I'm like, oh my God, guys, look what just happened. And Shanti knows what's going on, but as far as like the live show, I'm gonna have to wait until after it's all said and done. But trust me, you guys, I am taking notes. Because once this shit show is over, I will talk to you guys all about it. So yes, but I'm back now. I'm back.
We'll be spilling some tea then. We'll be spilling lots of tea.
Lots of tea. So
spilling tea.
And delusional people. Yeah, and delusional people.
Chad Daybell.
Yes.
Given the death penalty.
Given the death penalty. So you guys know we've been kind of talking about this, and the whole reason why, which is so incredible that you're going through the Mormon church with Jesse, because I've said this over and over and over again, even before I was on YouTube. I read the Book of Mormon just because I'm a weirdo and I just wanted to know what they believed. And I had no intention of ever becoming a Mormon. I never wanted to be a Mormon. The time I read the Book of Mormon, I was already happy with my belief. I just wanted to know what they believed. I wanted to be Snoopy and figure out. And first of all, as I was reading the Book of Mormon, I thought, this is the craziest crap I've ever read in my life. And I've read some pretty crazy crap that I think is actually legit. But this stuff was, the Book of Mormon, it's highly, highly manipulative. As you guys are learning with Jesse, and it's one of my favorite subjects to study because there's so much to it. As you can see with Jesse, like, it is so, the rituals, the temples, Moroni, all the different priesthoods, it is just like the levels of heaven, like, it is just so unbelievably, it's like somebody said it's like the sci-fi version of Christianity. Like it's
definitely sci-fi version of Christianity. I mean, and the more we actually look into it, and the more, you sort of see how, and honestly, I was just saying as well in the show with Jesse earlier on, the comments that I get from people on the shows, I mean, it's like, really, she's lying, da, 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 da. It's not that, but I mean, I understand why when people have been duped that badly.
Yeah.
So, they have so many layers of the cover life, right? People playing the cover part, this gorgeous exterior of what the Mormon church is. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, when you're looking as the levels get more intricate, what the higher ups are up to, it's shocking on another level. So if those of you haven't actually watched, and I'm sure probably most of you have that watch this channel, I really want to advise you to have a look at the series Jesse's putting out at the moment on the Mormon church.
Yeah, it's incredible.
There must be at least maybe 6 or even 7 interviews with her already. And if you haven't watched Caleb Jade, Understanding the Arcane as well. I mean, guys, we're getting some big scoops here, which have never been put out before. Jesse's information has never, and it's like she said today, she's put a lot of it together, and this has never been exposed before. So Jesse's information has never been exposed. Caleb's information has never been exposed. So
it's all coming out now.
It really is.
There's a lot of Mormon crimes that are going on. There's even different YouTube channels that are just covering Mormon crimes. And for me, the reason why Chad Daybell, I mean, speaking of delusional people, and Lori Vallow's case was important to me, because if you take Mormonism out of it, I've said this before, a lot of their delusions, I mean, Shanti, we were kind of talking about this off air. There's a lot of people that are in a lot of our contemporaries on YouTube, Shanti and my contemporaries, who both of us have a lot of disdain for, because we know they're delusional. We know they're lying. And a lot of these people are following the same path. You're seeing the same type of behavior that you see in Chad and Lori Vallow. There are a lot of users online that are swinging their pendulums, telling you who's a good or a bad person. Well, that's what Chad and Lori Vallow did. Find who's dark and who's light. And that's just, frankly, that's none of your business. Like, if you're uncomfortable around somebody and your gut's telling you not to be around somebody, just
F off, go and sit somewhere else, or go and see them, whatever. You don't just decide to take them out, and you just you don't decide that they're zombies. And it's true, Simona, what you're saying. I had lots of Mormons leaving at the moment.
Good.
Even though there was such an influx to the Mormon church a couple of years back, it was the fastest growing church. Now there are definitely a lot of Mormons leaving and breaking free of that matrix, which
Pandora's box has been opened for sure. And we look at like even Tim Ballard, who had what was the movie that was just released? Sound of Freedom.
With the kids, yeah. Sound of Freedom. That's right.
So we even look at Tim Ballard, and it's complicated because has Tim Ballard done really good things for rescuing some kids? Yeah, but he's also done some pretty crappy things too, right? And so we have to look. And Tim Ballard was following the same teachings, this visions of glory. That's like a subtext of Mormonism. He was following the same thing. Like there are even in Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie. There was a seminar where Jody Hildebrandt and Tim Ballard were speaking at the same seminar regarding the prepper. I mean, these are people prepping. I mean, it's the Latter-day Saints, and so they think that we're in the last part of Jesus coming back, and these people are getting these delusions that they are these prophesized characters. And I will remind you, I know we want to be we want to go over the law of one at some point, but part of the negative polarity is elitism, is believing that one human being is more valuable than the other human being, is believing that somebody is a prophet. Guess what? We're all prophets. You can go to a healer like Shanti or me in the yoga studio and allow us to use our education, our knowledge to help you. But Shanti, never once when we're doing stuff in the light do we ever value or believe that we're better than our students, do we? Or our clients, do we? No, never. Not. But Chad, so some people have referred to him and Lori Vallow now as serial killers. This is something I've contemplated. Are they now technically serial killers? I don't know, because for both Chad and Lori, their victims were people that they knew. Whereas a lot of
I would definitely say they're serial killers because, I mean, they've killed basically the first husband, or Charles Vallow,
well,
right?
He was the fourth husband.
Yeah, that husband, the brother, and I'm telling you, the brother was taken out as well.
I think so too.
As well as the two children as well. That's 5 people that have died, and
they tried to kill. So, and get this, you guys. So have you heard of Brandon Bordeaux? Have you heard that name yet, Shanti? Brandon Bordeaux?
Yes, but where do I know it from?
So he was Lori Vallow's niece's husband. And
that's the one, and that's the one I was trying to think. Then he was shot at as well.
And
then, I mean, he escaped by the skin of his teeth, right? Yeah. That's the one I couldn't remember. Yeah.
And their children were on the list. Their children were Brandon Bordeaux's and Melanie, his ex-wife's kids, were on the list as well as being dark souled. Joe Ryan, who was Tylee's biological father, he mysteriously died in 2018. And from what I understand, and this is just gossip, guys, you can look this up yourself. There's a lot of speculation that he was Lori's first victim. Now, the problem is some of these earlier deaths before it became national headlines, this was a national sensation. A lot of these deaths, a lot of the bodies are now cremated. But there is a petition to try to open up Joe Ryan's case, because a lot of people suspect that she killed him as well.
But didn't she say that he was raping her children?
Yes, but if you go through the FOIA documents, from one of the cases, the person that went through it, the little girl Tylee that's now passed away, she was very little at the time, and the counselor asked, "Did your mother tell you to say this?" And she said yes. So was he, or was he just accused of that? In order to, because no doubt in my mind that Lori Vallow, in my opinion, is a complete psychotic narcissist. And so when a narcissist is done with you, they will try to cancel you completely and make your life a living hell. So So there's a lot of speculation around even more people, and Lori Vallow is about to stand trial in Arizona. So I told Shanti, I've gotten some emails from people asking, because we're so lucky here, Shanti. I mean, you and I are from different countries. We have people we have such an international, and I forget sometimes that we're all like in different countries. Like I kind of forget that.
No, right?
So I've gotten some emails from people asking about, because it's been breaking news about the death penalty. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that just a little bit, about what that means. in the United States. So within and any Americans in the chat, you can help me with this if you want to. So basically, the United States is supposed to be like taking the cabal out of it, taking conspiracy out of it. Let's just look at the template. We are supposed to be a republic. So what that means is that there are 50 states, and each state is supposed to run as its own territory under the umbrella of the federal government. So what that means is we have federal laws and we have state laws. Now, with that being said, federal laws in the federal government, there is a death penalty. However, there's only 27 states who actually have the death penalty here in the United States. So some states don't have it, some states do. And I pulled up a list. So the 27 states that have the death penalty are Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Florida, Georgia, where I live, Idaho, where Chad is, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. So those are the states that have the death penalty. Now, there are some states that allow specific methods of execution, such as hanging or firing squad. Utah allows firing squad, but is the only state to have used one in the last decade. Mississippi also allows a firing squad. New Hampshire allows hanging. And Idaho, as of 2023, also brought back the firing squad. Now, with that being said, from what I understand is that if you are convicted and you get the death penalty, in a lot of states, if that have multiple options, you actually do get to pick your method of execution. I don't know why anybody would.
Do they still have the lethal injection there with you guys?
Yeah, that's the main. But what the complaint is that the lethal injection.
Electric chair? Because you had the electric chair as well.
We did have the electric chair for a while, but
that
has gone. Yeah, the electric chair has gone.
Why?
I don't know.
Was that too gruesome?
I think so. And this is what, and I was telling you, Shanti, offline, and I'm just be very, very honest. I have very mixed feelings about the death penalty. Very mixed feelings.
Yeah, me too.
With that being said, there is, in most states, generally speaking, there are 3 forms of the only thing you can be, the only 2 crimes as an American that you can get death for if you're in a death penalty state is, treason is part of the federal government. So treason is, the punishment is death.
And murder.
And then murder. Now, with that being said, there are 3, roughly speaking, there are 3 categories of murder: 1st degree, 2nd degree, and manslaughter. So manslaughter is accidental, like you're in a car accident. You know, like you're drunk driving, you hit someone and they die. Like you still are going to have to spend some time in jail, but it's not going to be a life sentence.
Yeah, it's not a deliberate.
No.
Yeah, I think obviously that a homicide, it's not deliberate. So, I think they also take it to, I mean, do you know that in France, and I don't know if it's still the same, because the Frenchmen are so romantic and, always like their threesomes, basically. And
menage a trois.
Yeah, I was going to say menage a trois. That's right. Terrible. I don't even speak French, so I must sound hideous when I say that.
That's the one term I know. I know je ne sais pas, I don't know, and menage a trois.
Trust you to know that. But apparently there is no, I mean, if you commit a crime of passion in France, you don't get the death penalty. I don't know if that's
the same. So that's 2nd degree. So like if manslaughter is the accidental death, and you're not going to get the death penalty for manslaughter, it was an accident. You'll have to serve some time. Sometimes it's not even that much time. Usually in manslaughter cases, the person who accidentally killed the other person feels so much guilt that that's kind of punishment enough, because it was an accident, it was a car accident, whatever. 2nd degree murder is a crime of passion. So in 2nd degree murder, you are not eligible for the death penalty because you didn't plan it. Like, let's say you get into a fight with somebody and you accidentally strike them and they die. Yeah. You intentionally gave violence to them in that moment, but it wasn't planned. And so that's considered 2nd degree. So you're not going to be given death for that. 1st degree homicide is when you plan it.
Yeah,
when you maliciously plan a death of somebody else. And so that is where in the 27 states where more than likely now in Idaho, from what I understand, so again, there's going to be different stipulations depending on state to state to state. So the stipulations of where I live in Georgia might be different from Idaho. And Idaho does something very unique that is not done in most states. So in most states that carry the death penalty, usually what will happen if a defendant is indicted on first-degree homicide, usually the prosecutor, the state, will bring you a plea deal. And they'll say, if you just plead guilty and admit you did this, we will take the death penalty off the table. That's usually their bargaining chip, is the death penalty. And you want a plea deal, because if you have a plea deal, that means that you don't go to trial, there you don't cost the state money, you don't have to pull a jury. All right. But Chad did not take that, so he had to go to trial. Now in Idaho, and I'm going to get to jury selection in a second. Now Idaho again does something very different. In most states, the jury of your peers decide whether you are guilty or not guilty. In most states with death penalty cases, if the jury says you are guilty, finds you guilty, it is then up to the judge to decide your punishment.
Right.
In Idaho, however, the jury decides your punishment, which I actually think is better and more fair. So the jury, the 12 jury,
as long as they all agree.
They have to all agree. That's the stipulation. They absolutely have to all agree. So for everything. So when so let's talk about jury duty. So for those who don't, so again, taking the cabal out of it or conspiracy out of it, basically what happens in the United States. Now I can only serve jury duty in my county, in Fulton County. I will never be called to serve jury duty in California. Well, I actually have served jury duty in California because I lived in California for where you are registered to vote, basically. When you go to register to vote in that county, you are then put into the system to serve jury duty. Now, it is your civic duty. And the funny thing is a lot of people, I have to give Americans credit for this, because a lot of people joke about jury duty like no one wants to do it. But every time I've served on a jury, every person I know who has served on a jury, listening to the jurors from Chad Daybell's case and Lori Ballow's case, most people who are called to serve a jury do take their job very seriously. And of course, and I remember the first time I served jury duty, I was really stressed out because the weight, and it wasn't a big case. It was a very simple case, but the fate of that defendant is in your hand, because in the United States, the way it is established is even though this person has been indicted on charges, they are still presumed innocent until found guilty by a jury of their peers. Now, how do they get indicted? So there's two juries. There's a grand jury and a regular jury. The grand jury, so that you can be called for a grand jury case as well. Grand juries are when the prosecutor feels like they have enough to charge someone criminally, and they present it to a grand jury. The grand jury then comes back and says, yes, we would unanimously has to say, yes, we would find this person guilty if this were, so that therefore they can indict the person. So by the time a person has been found guilty, they've literally gone through two different juries. Now, with jury selection, so again, what happens? So people, when you were registered to vote, in the United States, now they took this more seriously when I was a little girl. You will get a summons in the mail, and it'll say for jury duty, and you'll open it, and it'll basically be like 3 months out. So they'll tell you the date which you are supposed to report to the courthouse for jury duty. If for some reason you're going to be out of town at that time, you can always call the courthouse and reschedule for a later date. Anyway, so when I was a little girl, they took this, and they probably do, and still in small towns do this. If you don't show up for jury duty when you've been summoned, they will come and arrest you and haul your ass into court. You have to do it. Employers have to let you off. They have to for jury duty. It is your civic responsibility. So you get into the courthouse and you get pulled in. Now, you don't know, as a juror, you have no idea what kind of case you're walking in on. Most of the time, the cases are nothing burgers. A DUI, one of the cases I served was as a mistaken identity, right? Like, it'll take like a day or two, and that's it. Like a day or two and you're done. Oops. Now, can you imagine I had a friend in LA who had to serve on a homicide case, and she was out of work for 2 weeks. When you sit down, they first pull you. So you're pulled with 50 to 100 people, and they ask you a bunch of questions. The judge will first ask you set questions. Your age, are you married, just different things about you. And usually what the judge is doing at first is looking for people with hardship. So what does this mean? So the judge knows that this is going, like if you're being called in for Chad Daybell's trial, but you don't know it's Chad Daybell's trial, and the judge knows that this Chad Daybell trial took about 2 months. He knows that you're going to be basically taken out of your life for 2 months. He will ask you like things about your life. So let's say you have a mother who's a single mother of 5 kids, who works a minimum wage job. She's the only provider. She can't afford childcare. The judge is going to go ahead and dismiss somebody like that because that's not fair to put that hardship on that juror. So that's why they ask you all this information about your life to decide which people can actually afford in their lives to be away from their life for a couple of months. Now, once that happens, both the prosecutor and the defense attorney will ask people different questions. How do you feel about the police? Are you questions? Let's say, are you religious? What religion do you follow? Do you know anything about Mormonism? Do you believe in an afterlife? They're trying to figure out the biases each individual has. Now, at Chad Daybell's trial, and Lori Vallow, this was a hard one because they had to find people who had never heard of this case. And this case made national news. There was a freaking docuseries on Netflix. So the fact that they were able to find people who were not familiar with this case was a miracle. All right. So once they find, so basically what I'm saying is it literally, and they ask you if you know the defendant. If you know the defendant or if you know any of the counsel, the lawyers involved or the judge, you're immediately dismissed, right? You can't have any biases towards, they'll ask you if you've ever been arrested. I'll tell you guys, the first jury I sat on in Los Angeles, I was like 24, 25 years old. I was so nervous, but I loved that judge. He was hysterical. And then one of the questions they asked us in the preliminary was, have you ever been arrested? That was one of the questions. And they went down the row and nobody in that jury panel had ever been arrested until they got to this last lady. This lady was probably in her 70s. She had a walker. She looked like a Sunday school teacher. And the judge was like, ma'am, have you ever been arrested? And of course, the rest of us are thinking, no, she's never been arrested. She goes, well, it was the 60s, and I decided to get naked in public. The judge, you could see him trying to control his laughter. He literally put his head under his desk for a moment. And she ended up being on the jury, right? So, obviously it wasn't, she didn't have a vile, experience. She was like, well, it was the 60s and I got naked in public. And the fact that the judge got cracked up at that, and it was a very basic case, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But they'll ask you these questions to try to find the best non-partial jury. Now, when you serve jury duty, and I actually love serving jury duty because you get a badge that says juror. You are not allowed, when you're in the courthouse, you're not allowed to talk to the other jurors about the case until you deliberate. When you're in the court, people can't talk to you because you have a juror badge on because they're trying to keep you as non-biased as possible. When you go through the front door of the court, they let you in first. You're like royalty when you're a juror because they need you to get to your, when the jury walks in. So, like if you see on TV, when the judge walks in, they say, all rise as you stand up for the judge. They do the same thing for the jury. When the jury walks in, they say, all rise for the jury to walk in. So it's like your royalty, right? Because they show respect. Now, so with trials like Chad Daybell, if you guys watched it live, the monitors and screens that they had up were always facing away from the jury, so you couldn't see what the jury looked like. That's for their own safety. Now, the jurors themselves, when they went home at night, during the trial, they would go home to their homes. They could not talk to their spouses about the case at all. They could not say anything because they can't be influenced. And one of the jurors recently interviewed, he said he would send his wife an emoji, whether a thumbs up or a frowny face, whether it was a hard day or not, so she would know whether he needed to be alone, because I couldn't imagine like the emotional toll this case took on the jurors. And then once they had their final closing statements. That is when the jury in this case became sequestered. So what that means is that they had to pack a suitcase. I think one of them said like enough clothes for at least 2 weeks. They were taken to a hotel paid for by the court. Their TV was cut off, so they couldn't watch TV. They could watch pre-approved DVDs. Their phones were confiscated. They could speak like once. The bailiff had to be around them when they got to call their home just to check in and make sure they weren't talking about the case. And this is because, and sequestering for a jury typically happens in high-profile cases. You know, you hear about this a lot with mafia-based cases where the mafia, you know, I think it's the Pelican Brief. That was a book by John Grisham, and they made it into a movie where they talk about this jury tampering, where they find jurors and they threaten them or they bribe, you know, so they try to keep the jurors as protected as possible. You're also, the jurors, especially for something like Chad Daybell or Lori Vallow, you know, let's say they had come back with an innocent verdict. They would need to be protected because there are people that are would have to have bulletproof vest on. Lori Vallow wore a bulletproof vest into jail every day. So it's for their protection as well. So again, with Chad Daybell, they came back pretty quickly with a guilty verdict, and then they were sent away again. Now it's interesting because during this time, Crime Con has also been going on in the United States, which is a true crime conference. And so a lot of podcasters go, Dateline people go, and Nancy Grace was there. And they were asking some expertise what they felt like, because the jury had been out for like 2 days debating on whether he was going to get the death penalty or life in prison. And a lot of the specialists had said because they've been out for such a long time, they felt like it was going to be life because obviously one person was holding out. It has to be unanimous. But no, what had happened was, according to some of the jury interviews, is that they all agreed that the death penalty was appropriate. They just wanted to go through everything to just double check to make sure, because they were going to be handing somebody execution, right? Now, with that being said, we were talking about this off camera, Ashanti. Depending on the state you're in, it can take up to 40 years for you to get to the execution chamber because of all the appeals that have to go through. You know, back in the days of yore, they would.
But if he doesn't appeal it, then if he accepts it, then wow.
Automatically. So in any death penalty cases, automatically it goes into appeal to the Supreme Court. That's just automatic because it is a death penalty case. It's just what they do just to double make sure. Because I think there has been cases where somebody, you know, we have the Innocence Project where they've actually gotten people off of death row because they were actually innocent.
No, I think that's very correct, because I think if you know, I mean, the death penalty is a talking point for sure. I know in South Africa, we don't have it right now, and we haven't had it since maybe 30 or 40 years now. And that's absolutely crazy because our crime rate is so high that even African people are calling for the death penalty to come back because the cops are useless. There's so much crime and violent crime, you know, that people are just getting away literally with murder every single day. And,
literally. Yeah.
So something has to be done, you know, but when you look at our history, for example, prior to that, we did have the death penalty. And the only thing that we had, was there was no choice. You got noosed. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that 99.9% of murders were African people. You would hear occasionally of white people, and we're talking apartheid era, right? Of white people being noosed, and occasionally of a woman. You know, there were odd occasions, definitely. But and I'm sure that at least 60 or 70% of the African people who were noosed were not actually guilty of that. Yeah. So I think it's a good deterrent, because I do think that if you're going to be as brazen as to go in and deliberately take the life and violate and harm and torture and rape and whatever it is, another human being, then you got to have the balls, right, to actually receive and take the consequences of your actions. Yes, I believe in karma. Yes, I believe the wheel will inevitably turn in its own space and time, for sure. And ultimately, I also believe that no matter what happens between two parties, there's a sacred contractual spiritual agreement for that to take place. We don't know what their karma is. There's always karma between two people. And when there's that kind of karma that goes on between people, it's intense. So we don't know what their karma is. But in terms of our society, I always bear that in mind. So that's what makes me less judgmental. And when it comes to these sort of things. But for me, when we're looking at that, and we obviously trying to live in a safe society where people can actually walk at nighttime outside or walk on the streets on their own, we should be allowed that freedom. And especially not like in South Africa. I mean, there's certain areas you cannot even begin to walk in. I mean, I live in a very low crime area, which is a blessing. But go to the cities. They break in houses every opportunity they get, for sure.
I live in the middle of Atlanta, Georgia. I totally get that. Even when I take Ravi out to pee in the early morning hours, I'm looking over my shoulder because I'm in a city, and I get that. Crime happens even though I'm in a nice area of Atlanta, crime still happens,
But I think we should be given the right to live a free and fair life.
Yeah.
So if you are going to brazenly, I mean, if you look at, I think it was it Saudi Arabia many years ago? And hey, when I was living in Thailand as well, I would leave my wallet on the table. And the thing is, the Thai people believe they're Buddhists and they believe in karma, for sure. Karma is a thing. So they don't steal, not in the place where I was anyway. The cities, you're always going to find that. So that, but that's because they choose that, right?
Yeah.
But you go to a place like Saudi Arabia, I think it was Saudi Arabia, your hand would publicly be chopped off, and there'd be public executions, beheadings once a week or on a Friday, and whatever it was. Things like that are definitely a deterrent. It might be grotesque, but it's a deterrent. And if you're going to do that to a person, another person, you've got to be very, very sure that they have committed the crime and what their intention was behind that. And I think for me, I can accept that, because if I'm going to go and deliberately walk into an old lady's house, break her door down, rape her, knife her, do whatever, because I'm too much of a coward to do something else, I've got to accept the consequences of my actions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's, so for me, that's what it is. But yeah, it's a tough thing. The firing squad, I mean, I was watching a movie the other night, and it was actually a German movie from the Second World War. And it started with this group of 5 people, and they were all friends, and obviously they split, and they thought the war was going to carry on for a lot longer than what it did, but a lot shorter, rather. And one of the main characters was this beautiful young girl who was a lounge singer. And you know what happened with the lounge singers? They invariably were singing and entertaining the troops and what have you. Has an affair with a high-up military dude.
Go watch our episode, guys. Go back after this and watch our episode on Mata Hari. That's what happened in the First World War. That happened.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and then the next thing, she gets arrested for defeatism. And I said, what the heck is defeatism? It's when you speak bad of people like that. So she gets arrested, and the next thing you see her, she's hauled out, put into the courtyard, and is in front of a firing squad of 4 or 5 men. And I looked at this and I thought, I wonder how those men must feel about themselves, knowing that they've just stood there, 5 of them, against a defenseless woman who has committed no major crime and is being fired into the ground. I mean, it was a very poignant moment for me, I have to say. It made me think a lot about this sort of thing. But to be honest, if I had to be arrested for murder, I would probably want the firing squad. It's short and quick and boom.
This one may be interesting. I'm going to put the call out, Shanti, if you don't mind, to continue a deeper conversation. If there's anybody, even the people, if there's anybody watching or knows anybody who's an executioner to this day, the person that gives the lethal injection in the prisons, like I would love to talk, because I couldn't do that job. You know, I would be crying in the corner. Like,
I mean, and in South Africa, and my friend Yana, you guys have watched her father was the top. I mean, he earned the Windhoek Observer. He was a journalist, that old guy, I got to tell you. And there was everyone to this day. He passed away in 2014, I think. No. He passed away in 2008. He passed away in 2008. But he was very, very well known. And he was a criminal. I mean, there was not a stone unturned. That guy, because the executioners here in South Africa, and then Namibia was still Southwest Africa, which is part of South Africa, his identity was secret. No one knew who the hangman was. We called him the hangman, right? Her father found out who he was, and he had a meeting and an interview with him, which was never ever aired for obvious reasons, at the airport en route to his last execution. And that, to this day, Yana will speak about that. She knows more than what she's telling me, but I'll get it out of her one day.
I mean, even for us and in the United States, the executions are still somewhat public, not just for the general public, but you can come and if you are a victim, a family member of the victim, or if you are a family member of the person being executed, you can be there. And watch them execute the person. And so these doctors and nurses that are in the room now, this is wild, Shanti. This might be part of the reason why they brought back the firing squad. There are now cases in the United States where it's not working. The drug isn't working. There's one guy recently, they tried to execute him like 3 times.
What drug are you talking about? You mean the lethal injection? Okay.
Not working.
What is it they inject into them?
I'm like, have you guys tried fentanyl?
I've heard it's a very painful way to go. I've actually heard it's extremely painful.
I wouldn't know, but there's cases where it's not working. And so what do you do? There's one case that just recently came out where the guy, he's in Idaho as well. And so is that why they brought back the firing squad? I don't know. You know, it's complicated. Yeah, Simona, that's kind of my thought too. That's why I go back and forth over the death penalty. I know a lot of people who are very pro death penalty. And I know a lot of people who aren't pro death penalty. And I kind of go, I'm just hopefully I will never be, I mean, I'm never going to plan somebody's murder. So I know for sure I would never be in that situation, but hope to God, I hope I'll never be on a jury where in Georgia, I won't have to make that decision. I could just say guilty or not guilty, and the judge can make that decision. But, you know, but people who are pro death penalty, a lot of their reasoning is that if somebody spends the rest of their life in jail, who's paying for that person to stay alive? Who's paying for their food? Who's paying for their housing, their medical?
Yes, the taxpayer, of course. And I know there's a big hoo-ha from the taxpayers about supporting murderers, and they very often get quite luxurious lives in there. I mean, you know, if you've been in there for 40 years or 60 years or something like that, you know, You often see movies like, for example, The Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite movies of all time. And you see the old guy didn't even want to come out. They don't want to come out because they're too comfortable in there.
Yeah, they have their own little ecosystem in there.
It's totally. It's a different little planet.
Have you been watching the Gypsy Rose Blanchard stuff? The girl who had, if you haven't, we can cover that later on. It's very fascinating. Anyway, she basically killed her mom because her mom was Munchausen by proxy, a very extreme case. But she just got released from prison, and she was explaining how it's not that a jail is worse than prison. Like you have some certain freedoms in prison. And so taxpayers, or a lot of people like both of my grandfathers, for example, were very pro death penalty because they didn't want to be responsible, because both of my grandparents made a lot of money. And so they paid higher taxes. So they didn't want to be the people funding the murderers to stay alive. But the flip side of that, you guys, is that the drug that they use to euthanize humans is also expensive and costs the taxpayer money. So that might be another reason why they're bringing back the firing squad. I don't know. It's just, and somebody asked, like, when this came back, like, how did they do this? Well, apparently in states that have a firing squad, they have a whole freaking room set up. And
Right.
my boyfriend made a good point. He was like, well, you got the firing squad. You can just do a bunch of executions on the same day.
It's, it's just so grotesque to think about. But I do understand that in a society like we live in, where there's you just because you walk around in a meat suit and we all look the same doesn't mean that in here it's all the same.
Yeah.
And you have to protect people from other violent people. And I think every case has to go on its own merits.
Yep.
And I think, if it's a once-off thing, an accident, or you are having a fight, as you said, crime of passion, whatever. But that, I think, a once-off thing you'd need to be incarcerated for a while, because there's always a reason, that's my opinion. But when if you're a cold-blooded killer, a serial killer, and you've gone on a rampage, then I'm sorry, I think that needs to be looked at then. And I don't say and I don't know, maybe you just got to do it the same way they did it to whoever it is they did it,
My friend Tamara said the same thing. My friend Tamara said the exact same thing. Like, if you, and that was what the jurors, fortunately there's no pictures available of the autopsies of the children, but they showed pictures of the autopsies of the children in the court. They didn't show it to the public. They showed it to the jurors. And for both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, that is what got a lot of the jurors. And a lot of the people reporting on the case said when they showed the jurors, there were some people, that's when the jurors started crying. For Tylee Ryan, the 16-year-old, her body was brought in multiple bags. She had been brutalized. Her sin...
But was she brutalized? The question I have with that, and I've never really had an answer. How did she die? Did they shoot her?
They don't know, because her body was totally charred. They know from the bones that were left, though, there looked like there was aggression towards the pelvic region, which means sexual assault.
But did the sexual assault, now we know also what happens in the Mormon church. Was the sexual assault maybe from when she was a child with her father still?
No, I think it was pretty recent. I think what they saw was pretty recent. Dr. John, the forensic psychologist, said from what they know of the autopsy, which his wife did see the autopsy, it looked like she was beaten pretty, that it was pretty fresh. It looked like that.
So she was beaten and dismembered, or what?
Her jaw was broken. Nobody knows for sure who was the one who actually did the killing. But they, both Lori and Chad.
I think it's the uncle.
Too. Dr. John, and you guys go watch Hidden True Crime. They're amazing. Dr. John said, though, the aggression to Tylee's body, he wouldn't put it past it being Chad, because Tylee did not like Chad. The 16-year-old daughter did not like him and did not trust him. And so this 16-year-old daughter was standing in the way of Chad being able to boink Lori. And so that's why she was dark. And JJ, the 7-year-old, so this is they asphyxiated JJ. So they put duct tape over his mouth and put a bag over his head. And they said that in the autopsy, seeing his face, because he was still in body, he had bruises on his face, meaning he bruised himself trying to take the bag off. Now,
because he came in and he was being carried, right? And it looked like he was sleeping.
The last picture you see of him, he's sitting on the sofa in these red pajamas. He was 7. They're like little kid pajamas. Those were the pajamas that his body was found in.
Yeah. But he came in because what I saw, that particular night, the uncle brought him back and it looked like he was sleeping. So it would make sense if he was on his, and then obviously he was already dead. But I'm trying to understand, when it comes to Tylee, I also feel, if she was sexually violated, how recent was the violation? Was it a childhood thing? Was it Chad or her uncle? And who would have then been, if it was a more recent thing, who would have been the perpetrators of that
And how did
violation?
they do it? Did they use what? I mean, these are some questions I don't know if we'll ever have answers to.
Yeah.
Did they stick something up her because they were, was it a form of abuse? That was where my mind went by her, the way that they described the pelvis being that they used something external. If you guys, I don't want to be too graphic.
Yeah.
And yeah, Susan McComb says the duct tape was from his mouth all the way up to over his eyes.
Yeah.
This is just my opinion. Lori Vallow, especially after we talked to Asia Rain, in my opinion, I believe that Lori Vallow is a victim of MK Ultra, like the most extreme. And
no question around that.
I think because her mind is so broken, I think that she truly did believe that her children had been taken over by zombies, dark spirits, demons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that she'll have to continue to believe that in order to spend the rest of her life in a somewhat sane mental space. Because even at her closing statement, she said there was no murders that happened here. Basically, Now, Chad, I believe that, in my opinion, I'm not a psychiatrist, that Chad was more of the sinister one, that he was more of the one calling the shots. His wife, Tammy, and somebody said, how interesting is it that it was all Lori's family who was dark-souled and only Tammy, Chad's wife, in his family? Now, people will say, why didn't he just get a divorce? Well, this takes us back to Mormonism. It has to do, and any Mormons in the audience can correct me, like the fact that he had been sealed to Tammy and the fact that if he were to divorce her meant that he might not be able to ever be a bishop, meant that divorce wasn't an option. So we have that religious aspect, but we also have insurance money, life insurance. Charles Vallow was smart because he saw his wife spiraling. And he moved the beneficiary of his life insurance from his wife, Lori, to his sister, Kay, because Charles assumed that if something happened to him, that his sister, Kay, would take custody of JJ. So he sent that money to her. I don't think even Charles knew that JJ was going to end up dead just a few months after Charles. Right? So, and this is where it gets me too. Chad Daybell himself has 5 children. He has a few grandchildren. And even though, from what it seems, his children very much believe their father is innocent and very much believe he was a victim of Lori Vallow, I can't help but feel so sorry for his kids. Because their mother is dead, and now their father is on death row.
Yeah,
I cannot imagine. And that's where my heart breaks, especially since the kids still are in that place of like cognitive dissonance. And a lot of people have made fun of his kids online about their belief system. And it's like, put yourself in their shoes. Their mother's dead. And the cops are now telling them that their father killed their mother. And now their father's on death row and he's responsible for the murder of 2 children that were buried in his backyard. Your brain is going to do mental gymnastics to try to preserve your sanity.
Right. Totally.
And so I think people need to back off of Chad Daybell's children. Will they?
Yeah, I mean, they had nothing to do with it, They weren't involved. They lost their mother as well in a horrific murder. And their father is now given the death sentence.
2 of the children did testify. 2 of the children did testify in the trial for the defense. And a lot of the jurors didn't believe them. And some of the juror members said that it felt like they had been coached. But I will say that even with that, these are adults. These are around my age. But even with that, I think that the jurors also had a lot of empathy. I'm going to get emotional. I think that even though they knew that the children were potentially lying under oath and they had been coached, I think that they felt so much compassion for the position.
Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's why I say, imagine their mother's been murdered. First they think their mother died in her sleep. Yeah. Then they find out that the father probably murdered the mother. This whole case is spread and spattered all over the... Yeah, and not just in America, all over the world, actually, right? So there's all of that going on. And now their father's arrested for murder. And I mean, he's murdering children, he's murdering their mother, he's murdering other people or behind it. I mean, it must be for a child's mind or a youngster's mind. I mean, I think those people are going to need therapy for life. That's for sure. I mean,
well,
it's
a lot
crazy.
of people are saying that Emma and Garth, the two kids that testified, need to be indicted for perjury, and other people are saying, I don't think the prosecutor is going to go there because they got what they wanted. They got Chad Daybell on death row. Leave the kids alone. As a human being, even though they might have lied under oath, the amount of torment these adult children, and they have children of their own. How do you then explain to your 5-year-old where grandpa is?
Yeah.
How do you explain that grandpa is going to be executed? How do you even begin? And you're right, Shanti, these kids, the 5 Daybell children, just looking at them, like 2 of them are elementary school teachers. They are not people. You can just see they're not people that are seeking a public spotlight. They are just average Joes who want to just live a quiet life. And now everybody knows their last name. Everybody knows what they look like. You can Google images of, these
ways to get famous, get your dad to commit murder.
Exactly. But you don't get much money from that, do you? I just hope that people that are watching this case, even though Chad Daybell's children themselves are adults, they're in their 30s, they're coming into their 40s, they're still his kids. And their parents themselves, some of them, have empathy, have compassion for the position that they are in. And how would you feel if that was your dad? I don't have the best dad in the world, but my dad's never murdered children. My dad's never, I can't imagine that realization that this man who you've called dad, who was there at the birth of your children, took the life of 2 other children. Like, I can't.
And especially the betrayal, because he was always this holier than thou, famous prophet, author, whatever it was he was doing, and always thinking that he's trying to do good for the world, right? And then suddenly here he is arrested for, let's call it, 5 murders. I mean, this is crazy, and I agree. I think the family, I don't care if they're adults or teenagers or whatever, I think they should be, anyone can understand.
Yeah, leave them be.
You want to, you want to lie for your dad, Chad gave $40,000 to his children from the life insurance. I wonder if they will pay.
Somebody's already brought that up, Susan. What people say is probably not. Because the children, when they got the $40,000, they didn't know that it was blood money, basically, and they've probably spent it on car.
Are we talking about from his wife? Was that the policy that was taken out on his wife?
Yeah, Tammy Daybell had about a $450,000 life insurance policy or something. So $500,000. We'll just round it up, $500,000. So he gave his kids. Somebody talked about it. They probably won't pursue it.
Did he give them each $40,000?
I think so. He has 5 kids.
So that would have been like 200,000, all right? Then that he gave to his children. Do you think he would have given them that much, or did he each give them like 10,000?
I don't know. Like, he loved his kid. Like Chad, like his kids were never dark, right? His kids were always, they were the prime examples of Lori's kids. And from what I understand, like the way that happens, like he was found guilty of insurance fraud as well. So, because Chad committed the insurance fraud, his children did not, right? Yeah. So Chad got the money, gifted it to his children. His children have probably used the money to do whatever they
want. What Susan's saying, 10 most likely. I can't imagine that he murdered his wife for $500,000 and gives his kids $200,000. Because $300,000 is probably not going to get him very far with a lavish lifestyle.
And they moved to Hawaii. They were in Hawaii.
Yeah, they were gallivanting all over. They were,
so when and even with like the money that Chad spent, they're not going to reclaim that money back. Because if you go to a car dealership, and you buy, let's say you buy a car. You can't, the state then can't go to the car dealership and demand the car dealership give the money back, because the car dealership, it's not the car dealership's responsibility to find out where the money came from. you're exchanging goods. And so he just gets charged with that fraud. And that's that. And I think they'll leave. I just think that they're going to leave the kids to, whatever.
Well, quite frankly, I think that to her I mean, she did die. She should be paid out for her life policy, right? Just not to him. And that should go to the kids and the grandkids, actually. That's my opinion on these things.
And what's crazy, Shanti? So
might have been hush money. I agree. That's the first thing I thought, Susan, actually.
Oh, I think the kids, though. I think Chad has those kids right where he wants them. I mean, Emma, the daughter, was talking to her dad on the phone every day in prison. This woman is married with children of her own, and she's talking. That's how much control he ran his family like a cult, right? And I think that what was I gonna? There's another point I was gonna. Oh, his house. So the property where the kids were buried that Chad owned. His daughter Emma's living in that house now, and do you know, you guys, because a good defense attorney is expensive. Chad deeded the property to his defense attorney, John Pryor, as part of his payment. Emma Daybell, his daughter, has been living on that house and had no idea that John Pryor, the defense attorney, actually owned the property. So Chad Daybell is not transparent with his children. Could you imagine? You sell your house, you use whatever funds from your house to help your dad, you go live on your dad's property, only to have that property taken out from under you, and you have no idea. This guy is a scumbag. He is a scumbag. So.
No, they're very skanky. I mean, Chad, and I honestly think that he was more, I mean, if you look at Laurie, and yes, I mean, also going back to our conversation with Asia a few weeks back, right? I definitely feel, I mean, she had this like whole little sex kitten thing going for a while there. And I do believe that's part of her programming, because I've no doubt that she had stuff happen when she was young, right?
Yeah.
So she had that whole little sex kitten thing going there. And I think that she just wanted to find the right man and be loved. That's what I think with her. I don't think she's innately evil. I really don't. That's my opinion. Her mind was absolutely very broken, and I think she was manipulated and controlled by a lot of powerful people in this church system. And I think Chad Daybell was the one, because, as you say, I mean, her prior husband, I mean, he was quite a hottie. I mean, he was like quite all right looking, right?
Yes, and Chad
was definitely a little bit chunky. Chad, a little bit chunky.
That makes me mad too. I was thinking about this morning. John Pryor, his defense attorney, trying to convince people that Tammy Daybell died of natural causes because she was a little chubby as a 49-year-old middle-aged woman, but yet she was training for a 5K and taking dancing classes. I'm sorry, Chad obviously was not sexually attracted to Tammy like he was to Laurie.
Yeah.
But by the grace of God, go I, Chad. You're judging your wife for being chunky. Have you seen you? Have you seen your man?
Yeah, he doesn't even have a neck. But anyway, so I think, I'm not into look shaming anyone, I assure you. But when you look at her, you generally, and you would, and she, in my mind, would.
I think we can shame him because he shamed his dead wife. I mean,
so he had some type of charisma. He had some type of power over her. And I think that was this whole religious spirit thing that he had. And that, of course, making himself out to be this prophet. And then, he had this premonition the day he met Laurie that God said he was going to meet this amazing woman that day. Despite the fact that she was, I think, married, or he was married, whatever, it doesn't matter. He was married, I think. I definitely think he knew how to push her buttons and pull her strings. In other words, be the puppet master, for sure. He had that power over her.
Listen, and if his pickup line with women was, "We were married in a past life."
Yeah.
If a man says that to me in a bar, I'm going to smack him in the face. I'm going to be like, "Were we also divorced in a past life too?" Because that's. I mean, if that's.
I actually posted something on Facebook yesterday, which is quite funny. It says, I was thinking now, when you meet someone and you're sure you've been lovers in a past life. And then after 2 weeks, you realize why you haven't connected for 2,000 years.
Oh, yeah, that's why you're my ex. But I'm like, how lame is that? I'm sorry, if you're going to use a pickup line at a bar and you've got to use past lives, that means that there's not a whole lot interesting about you in this life. And yes,
there's definitely some issues going on there.
That's sure. John Pryor going after Tammy's wake, that son of a bitch. Excuse my language. Tammy Douglas was a 49-year-old woman. She had given birth. We got great men that watch this show. Most
actually given birth to 5 kids, for God's sake. So yeah.
Most men I know are very loving of their wives and love their bodies, wives, their
curviness and everything, yeah.
More after they've given birth to their children because they've seen the miracle that their wives did. And if you got a few extra pounds on you, it's not like she was overweight. She was a middle-aged woman who she financially supported Chad. She was the one that worked, and she was training for a 5K. She was doing Zumba classes, dance classes after school. There's now a foundation that's been set up in her name, guys, to get books into kids' hands because Shanti, she loved animals. Tammy Day, and I do feel bad. You know, I think sometimes in this case, Tylee and JJ, because they're the children, really get the headlines, and I don't want. And that's so important because they were innocent children. But I don't want Tammy or Charles to be lost in the mix. Tammy, apparently she loved animals. She loved ducks. There was a pet cemetery in the backyard. Apparently Chad didn't even like animals, which doesn't surprise me. Apparently all the kids that they had to, because Tammy was a librarian at the elementary school, and they had to put a curtain over her window because she would wave to every child that walked by and say hello. And so she wasn't able to get her work done because that's the type of woman that she was. She was a nurturer. She was a mother. She had just become a grandmother. And he robbed her. She devoted her life to him.
No, I agree. And, you know, he needs to sit, and he needs to sit in his little 3x3 cell for the next 40 years. And he needs to think about on his own, and he needs to think about what he's done. You know, he really does. He needs to consider the type of person that he became. And, you know, let's hope that he really does, because oftentimes I've heard stories that on death row, by the time the guys actually get to go to the execution, they have found peace, because that trauma to the mind breaks through. There's often a breakthrough, and then they start really, and it's not a religious thing. It's really just understanding the consequences of their actions. Where they truly regret it, they become feeling again. You know, anyone who murders, and especially in that way, I mean, think about, the last thing on my mind is murder. I can be how mad with someone. I'll say I want to shake you until your teeth rattle. But, you know, to actually murder someone, A, something is clicked in your head, or B, you're playing out past wounds that have been, maybe things have been inflicted upon you, etc., etc. And I'm not talking about in a military situation. I understand in the army, in the military,
in combat,
it's a very, very different mind game. That, you know, I'm talking about
self-defense. In self-defense, you guys, if you kill someone in self-defense, that's not a crime. There's no charges, and they can tell. They can tell whether it's self-defense or not. So, you know, and even the law of one says that's, you know, if it's your life or somebody else.
Yeah, you're allowed to defend yourself. You're allowed to defend yourself, and you know, if someone's coming at you, and you're protecting your belongings, you're protecting your life, you're protecting your children, whatever it might be, you know, then self-defense, no, you're allowed that. No, it's all about intention. It's always, always, always about intention. Everything in life is about intention. What is your intention?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, once you understand your intention, then you can make peace. Either way, you either have to admit that you're a murderous, bloodlusty, whatever, and make your peace with that, or you realize it was a big mistake. You're in the And what else is there for you to learn through this experience? If you are found guilty of homicide, maybe it was drunk driving, maybe it was
those people, they usually only get like manslaughter.
Loaded firearm, whatever it might be, you know.
They usually only get about 10 years, I think, is the average for manslaughter, which I think is fair, because usually when you see cases, the person that did it is so sore, in so much grief that you know, they didn't mean to. And I will say, you guys, like, if you want to hear, like, they read the victim impact statements are online. You can listen. Colby, Lori's oldest son, said, you know, his whole family's gone because of Chad. He lost his mother. He lost his siblings. His dad's dead.
Yeah, let's never forget the son that lives on, you know, because I mean, and I know, you know, when I was watching that docuseries as well, it's very sad because, you know, his new wife, new baby as well, going through, I mean, and his little sister was murdered, his little brother. I mean, imagine dealing with that as a young man, that your father was murdered by your mother's new lover murdered
your siblings,
both your siblings, as well as he was quite good friends with Charles, wasn't he?
Charles, he said Charles was like his dad. He was a stepfather.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was going to say. So
father.
Everyone he loved was murdered.
By
his mother and their depraved lover.
I think the docuseries, does it start off with a recorded phone call he had with his mother from jail, where he's crying and he's like, "Why did you do this? Like, they were my siblings. That's my," you know, if you can, there's 2 phone calls recorded from jail, because they're all recorded from jail, but that have been released with Lori's sister Summer, which is heart-wrenching, and her son. And Colby has a YouTube channel, and he did put a video out thanking people for the support. And somebody asked in the live chat, "Do you still talk to your mother?" And he said, "No, I don't talk to my mother anymore." So he did lose his mother. And I don't, you know, I just that is hell. That
but even all throughout that stuff, you know, she was denying it. You know, when you'd ask her where she was denying.
She believes that the zombies had taken over her children, because I think her mind is broken. I think she's MK.
No, I feel that. I definitely feel that it's something. And even if you just look the way she looks now, there's definitely something, there's another kind of entity that's operating through her. And you know what I also think, and what I was told by someone in the know, is that even though she's in jail, and the thing is, they've now created this thing for the LDS, they still can use her, and they'll still fetch her and abuse her, take her back. She still belongs to them. And I mean, when I was told that, it broke my heart as well, because I also think at some point she was just an innocent child, and I think she's been violated her whole life. That's my opinion on Lori Bella.
There's so many victims in this. There's so many. Nobody wins in this. Nobody wins. So,
but I think it's important that this, you know, that this scenario has brought attention to the LDS Church.
Oh, there's so many more. We can cover Blaze Thibodeau. There's a lot of, the Mormons are making the headlines right now. They are making the headlines. It is coming out right now. I do also want to cover, so I want to go through if you want to, Shanti, and if our audience wants to, the Gypsy Rose Blanchard stuff with there. She's not Mormon, but that's a very interesting case.
I'd love to. We can do that. Maybe next week.
Yeah, we can talk about it, because she's got a reality show now, and that's a crazy case of Munchausen by proxy, and that Delulu wackadoo. If you want to feel sane, just come watch us, and we'll talk about the craziest of the crazy, so you can feel more sane.
And then you can feel really good about yourself, and we think, "Oh, we're so normal."
Yes, I know. And you guys, for the men in the world, if you ever don't feel sexy, just be like, "At least I'm not Chad Daybell. At least I don't look or act. At least I don't have to pick up women by being like, hey, you and I boinked in a past life. Want to go to the Motel 6?
You're my wife.
You're my wife. You're mine." Be like, "Bro, I'm not your wife this life." So
sad, actually.
Yeah, so sad.
Anyway, we have reached our time. I have a supernatural thing that tried to make me believe things. Thankfully, I called me. That's Jojo Waken. Absolutely. You know, always remember these things cannot take over you or enter you unless you give permission. You speak to anyone. I mean, and I don't know if you've been listening to Caleb's stuff, and I mean, for those of you who don't know, but Caleb was in the arcane for 35 years. And he was a master mage. So, and he studied all 13 levels of magic. And so he will tell you stuff, I mean, where they literally, the only way you can enter or get somebody to do things for you is when on some level you give them permission. And and you can give permission through excessive alcohol when you block out, because we all know that ghoul, that demon that takes over when people get drunk and you forget stuff. That's alcohol. Drugs, obviously through satanic stuff, you know, you can consciously give permission or not. And, you know, if they sense, it's like, if you guys watched my interview with Jerry Marzinski the other day, an anonymous, guys, if you haven't watched that, you must go and watch that interview. It is brilliant. Jerry Marzinski is brilliant. And Anonymous was one of these who, and with schizophrenia particularly, and Jerry has proven now that schizophrenia is not hallucinations or voices in the head, so to speak. It literally is entities. And again, you go to Caleb. Caleb will tell you exactly how they did that. That's
why I want to cover my case with you, Shanti, when this is
totally. So that because they literally extract the soul.
I have another call. I gotta jump on.
Well, let's call it a day. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you. I'll see you tomorrow with Caleb. So have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day.
That's God bless you. For our gossip. We got a fun one. I'm going for the Popes this time, guys. We're going for the Popes. So
I love it. And you must remember to be good out there. Be good, though.
Be good so you don't end up on our show. Bye, guys.
Cheers, guys. Take it easy. God bless you.